The world changes when the sun goes down. Most of us are tucked away in our homes, safe and sound. We lock our doors, draw our curtains, and surrender to the comfort of our beds. But for some, the night is when their work begins. They are the watchers in the dark, the security guards who patrol the silent, empty spaces that hum with life during the day, fall into a deep, unsettling stillness after hours. They are the lonely sentinels standing guard against the threats we imagine, and sometimes the ones we could never possibly conceive of. The darkness holds secrets, you see. It wraps itself around old buildings and forgotten places, and it doesn't always like to be disturbed. Tonight, we're going to walk the rounds with 3 of these guardians. We'll step into their shoes, we'll hear the strange, unexplainable noises that echo through deserted hallways and bounce off cold concrete walls. The job says watch and report, trespassers, vandals, thieves, but it never mentions the things that don't leave footprints. Our first story begins with a man named Frank, and a place that held the ghosts of industry. Frank was in his late 50s, a man whose body had paid the price for a lifetime of hard labor. A slip on a greasy factory floor had left him with a bad knee, a permanent limp, and an early, unwelcome retirement from the life he knew. He needed a quiet job, something to bridge the gap to his pension. The irony of guarding a derelict mill, a place so similar to the one that had broken him, wasn't lost on him. The job was night watchman at the old Blackwood mill. It had stood silent for decades, a skeletal ruin on the edge of town. The official story was a market downturn, but locals whispered of a different reason. A foreman who vanished without a trace, a series of gruesome accidents the company swept under the rug. Frank dismissed it as small-town folklore. His job was simple: keep adventurous teenagers out. No vandalism, no accidents. Easy money, he thought. His routine was a simple, lonely waltz. 2 patrols a night. He'd walk the perimeter, his flashlight beam dancing over rusted fences and chained doors, then retreat to the relative comfort of his little shack. Inside, a space heater hummed, a thermos of lukewarm coffee sat by his elbow, and a half-finished crossword offered a welcome distraction from the oppressive silence. 10 p.m. and 2 a.m. The crunch of his boots on gravel was the only sound for miles. In the moonlight, the mill loomed over him, its rows of broken windows like the vacant, staring eyes of a colossal skull. It was a place that felt watchful. For the first few weeks, every groan of settling metal, every gust of wind whistling through shattered panes sent a shiver down his spine. But he'd learned to dismiss them. Just an old building, he'd mutter. Bricks and steel. He'd turn up the talk radio, letting the drone of distant voices fill the void. The hours would tick by, with only the chirping of crickets and the occasional hoot of an owl for company. But then came a Tuesday in late October. A sudden, biting cold seeped from the nearby river, carrying with it a fog so thick it felt solid. It rolled in like a silent gray tide, swallowing the mill whole, muffling the world until all sound ceased to exist. It was time for his 2 a.m. patrol. Stepping out of the shack was like stepping into nothingness. The silence was different tonight. It wasn't empty, it was heavy, suffocating. It felt as if the fog itself was holding its breath, waiting. His flashlight beam, usually a confident spear of light, was now a pale, trembling ghost, barely piercing the gloom. As he cautiously approached the main loading bay, a prickling sensation crawled up the back of his neck. He wasn't alone. He heard it first, a sound that cut through the thick silence. A faint, rhythmic scraping from inside the bay. Scrape, drag, scrape. It was the sound of something heavy, something with a wet, dragging weight, being pulled across the concrete floor. It was slow, agonizingly deliberate. His heart hammered against his ribs. He shone his light on the loading bay doors. The heavy chain was taut, the industrial padlock firmly in place, gleaming with dew. It was untouched. There was no way in, or out. He cleared his throat, his voice sounding small and thin in the oppressive quiet. "Hello? This is security. Is anyone in there?" His words didn't echo. They were simply swallowed by the fog. The scraping stopped. Instantly. The silence that rushed back in was a physical force, a crushing weight that made his ears ring. He stood frozen, straining to hear anything. A footstep, a cough, a breath. There was nothing. He backed away slowly, never taking his eyes off the door, before turning and walking, almost running, back towards the shack. He didn't need to see the eyes. He could feel them, dozens of them, watching from the black, gaping windows of the mill. Back inside, the shack no longer felt like a sanctuary. It felt like a cage. He killed the radio, the cheerful chatter suddenly obscene. The crossword lay forgotten. He just sat in the dark, staring out the window at the impenetrable wall of white, and listened. When the first rays of dawn finally burned through the fog, the relief was so profound it left him dizzy and nauseous. He almost called in sick that night, but a mixture of pride and the desperate need for the paycheck forced him back. He came prepared with a larger, heavier flashlight, as if a brighter beam could keep the darkness at bay. As the clock ticked towards 2, the fog returned, just as thick, just as silent. And with it came a new sound, not a scrape, but a soft, wet whisper that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. It was the sound of a voice, speaking words he couldn't understand, slithering through the mist right beside his ear. Our second story takes us to a place that should be full of healing, but now sits in silent, suffocating decay. St. Jude's Hospital wasn't just closed, it was condemned, a concrete carcass left to rot, its windows like vacant eyes. It was a monument to forgotten sorrows. This is where we meet David, a college student working nights for a demolition company. He needed the money, and the job seemed simple: patrol the quiet, empty halls of Old St. Jude's until the wrecking ball arrived. His boss's instructions were brief: patrol the grounds, check the accessible floors. But one rule was absolute. Stay out of the condemned wings, he'd said, tapping a blueprint. Especially pediatrics in the North Wing, it's sealed for a reason. The first nights were uneventful. His only companions were the echo of his own footsteps and the stale, chemical smell of antiseptic. Shining his flashlight into empty rooms revealed overturned beds and fallen charts. He felt like a janitor of memories, walking a tomb of healing. The pediatric ward door was a grim landmark on his route, bound by a heavy chain and padlock. Faded cartoons of smiling animals were peeling from the wood, their faces warped by time into grotesque leers, a promise of joy sealed over bad memories. Then came the noises. At first a faint giggle, so quick he thought he imagined it. It always seemed to drift from the North Wing. He blamed the settling building, the wind, the ducks, but it kept happening, growing more frequent. Soon a new sound joined in, the delicate, tinny melody of a music box, playing a warped lullaby from far behind the chained door. His rationalizations wore thin. Curiosity began to war with a cold apprehension. He knew to stay out, yet the sounds grew insistent, feeling less like an echo and more like an invitation. One night, as he passed, the lonely music box was replaced by a chorus of laughter. Several children, their voices faint and distorted, as if from a great distance. He pressed his ear to the cold wood. The sounds became clearer, children playing, the unmistakable patter of small feet on linoleum. Impossible. He'd checked the records himself. The wing had been sealed for 20 years, its utilities cut. He backed away, heart hammering. What would he say? Ghost children? He'd be laughed at, or fired. He tried to rationalize it away again. A radio, the vents. But the excuses felt hollow. He was alone with this secret. He needed proof. The following night, he brought a digital recorder. He placed it by the door and waited. After an hour of tense silence, it came. One clear giggle, then another and another. Soon the recorder was filled with the sounds of running and laughing, a phantom game of tag, its innocent joy a chilling counterpoint to the rot and darkness. Then a new sound cut through the laughter, a rhythmic thump, thump, the sound of a rubber ball bouncing. It grew louder, closer. It wasn't just in the room anymore. It was coming down the hall, right to the door. It was coming to him. He scrambled to a small, grimy window in the door. Wiping away the filth, he peered through. His flashlight beam cut through the darkness, revealing a ward frozen in time, empty cribs, old equipment, and in the center of the floor, a single red rubber ball. As he watched, breathless, it gave one small final bounce as if waiting. Now we descend, from an abandoned mill and a decaying hospital to a place deep beneath the bustling city. We leave the ghosts of the past for a modern horror, one born of concrete and suffocating silence, far below the world of the living. Our final story is about Marco, working graveyard in a massive, multi-level underground garage. State-of-the-art by day, a bustling hive. By night, a silent concrete labyrinth. His lonely patrol took him from P1 down 5 levels into the earth and back again. A simple task in the echoing emptiness. P5, the lowest level, was different. The air was colder, the darkness deeper. Reserved for long-term storage, its empty bays felt like sealed tombs. The other guards avoided it. Marco just found it unnerving. It was Thursday around 3 a.m., the deadest hour. He walked the perimeter, his boots scuffing in the vast quiet. Everything as it should be. He turned for the elevator and then, clang. The unmistakable slam of a car door echoed through the concrete. He froze. 5 levels down, the gate above was locked and monitored. No car could be here. He scanned the rows of empty spaces, his flashlight cutting through the gloom. He saw nothing, not a single car, just vacant bays. He turned to leave, then saw a dark puddle on the floor. Not oil, not water. He knelt closer. It was thick, dark red, and still wet. As he stared, a single drop splattered from the ceiling onto the back of his hand. He snapped his head up. A woman clung to the concrete above him, her limbs twisted at impossible angles. Her head cranked down to meet his eyes, a silent, impossibly wide grin stretching her face as dark liquid dripped from her hair. The scream stuck in his throat. He scrambled backward and fell, his flashlight skittering away into the darkness. Her silhouette hung above him like a monstrous spider. He remembered nothing clearly until the police came, finding him babbling in the elevator. They searched P5. They found nothing, no woman, no puddle, only his abandoned flashlight on the cold, clean floor. Marco quit the next day, haunted by what he saw. The silence of an empty building isn't really silence at all. If you listen closely, you can hear its history. You can hear the memories trapped within its walls. And sometimes, if you're very, very unlucky, those memories hear you too. The job description says to watch and report, but no handbook tells you what to do when the night watches back. The night is long and it's full of whispers. The job is simple, make it to morning. But some nights stretch forever. If you've walked those rounds, you know, share your story below and keep your light close. Whisper, are you ready for the next patrol?